My daughter-in-law locked me in the basement on my birthday. She went out partying, not realizing I still had my phone. An hour later, something happened that made her face go completely pale and... Imagine celebrating your 67th birthday, not with cake and loved ones, but locked in a cold, damp basement. That night, trapped in the darkness, I stumbled upon a betrayal so profound. It shattered every belief I held about family and love. It was a discovery that would change my life forever or end it. The house on Magnolia Drive had always felt a little too quiet, a little too clean, but on that particular evening, the silence was deafening. Up until then, I'd been a ghost in my own home, wandering through rooms filled with other people's lives, trying to make sense of how I'd ended up here. My name is Eleanor Hayes, and at 67, most people picture me knitting peacefully, surrounded by grandchildren. That was my dream once, but life, as I've learned, rarely follows the script. The stark reality is that living under the same roof with a daughter-in-law who views you as nothing but a burden is anything but peaceful. It all began 3 years ago when my beloved husband, Arthur, died of a heart attack after 42 wonderful years together. Suddenly, I was utterly alone in our spacious home on Cherry Street. Every corner, every object, was a painful reminder of him. His worn armchair, his collection of old vinyl records, the tools in the garage meticulously hung. Arthur was a railroad dispatcher, a man of order. "Trains don't forgive tardiness, Yelly," he'd always say. He was the anchor, I was the one who nurtured our home. After his death, our cozy nest became a silent museum of memories, and I, a phantom stumbling through the past. The quiet was deafening. I tried to fill it with TV, radio, even talking to my houseplants. My son, Michael, visited once a week, usually Sundays. But his visits were short, awkward. We'd never been exceptionally close, and his relationship with me still felt stuck in his teenage years, where every word I uttered was perceived as a lecture. So, when he suggested that Sunday over lunch that I sell the house and move in with them, I agreed almost instantly. It felt like a lifeline. I'd help them with the down payment for a new, bigger house with space for me, and in return, I'd get the family I so desperately feared losing. "You don't want to live alone, Mom, do you?" Michael had said, covering my hand with his. "Besides, Chloe will be thrilled to see her grandma every day." Chloe, my granddaughter, was 15 then, and at 12, she'd been so excited about me moving in. We used to be so close. I'd taught her to bake cookies, told her stories about how Arthur and I met at an amusement park dance in January. She'd listen, rapt, braiding colorful bracelets at my feet. But back then, 3 years ago, I didn't truly know Sarah, Michael's wife, as I do now. When we met on holidays, Sarah was all smiles and friendliness. "Eleanor, you look amazing." "Eleanor, this pie's divine." "Eleanor, we are so happy to see you." Now I see her smile never quite reached her eyes, and the compliments felt rehearsed, hollow. We sold the house quickly. Real estate in Pomona was booming. I made a decent sum, most of which went towards their new house on Magnolia Drive. It was a spacious 2-story place, basement, backyard, the works. "I got you a room on the first floor next to the kitchen, Mom, to make it more comfortable," Michael said. For a few months, things went smoothly. I helped with cooking, sometimes picked Chloe up from school when Sarah was busy at her nail salon. Sarah talks about her salon like it's a chain of high-end spas, but it's really just a modest place. Michael works for a plastic window company, tedious, but stable, he says. The change started subtly, about 6 months in. Sarah began forgetting to call me to the table when guests were over, or making pointed remarks about my clothes. "Eleanor, that sweater makes you look so old," or "Eleanor, that color just doesn't suit your skin tone." Then came the more obvious signs. My treasured cookbooks were boxed up and banished to the garage, taking up too much space. My small collection of porcelain figurines migrated from the mantelpiece to the top shelf of my closet. They don't fit the new aesthetic. By the end of our first year, I felt invisible in my own home. Michael was always at work or glued to his phone. Chloe spent more and more time with friends or locked in her room. And Sarah? Sarah had transformed into a relentless overseer, controlling my every move. "Eleanor, you left your cup in the sink again." Eleanor, please don't touch the thermostat. The electric bill is huge as it is. Eleanor, we agreed you wouldn't use the washing machine on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Those are my days. I tried to talk to Michael, but he just waved it off. Mom, you're exaggerating. Sarah just likes order. You need to get used to the new rules. And those rules multiplied every month. No TV after 9 p.m. because it interfered with Chloe's study habits. I couldn't invite my few girlfriends over because the house isn't a place for retired people to gather. I couldn't cook anything more complex than a sandwich because the smell of fried food gets into the curtains. Gradually, my world shrank to the size of my room, where I retreated more and more often to avoid Sarah's barbed remarks. I started to feel like a guest, tolerated out of charity, rather than a family member whose money had made this house possible. The most painful blow was Chloe's alienation. Sarah methodically sabotaged our bond, preying on adolescent vulnerability and the desire to fit in. Your grandma is so old-fashioned. Look how strange her habits are. You don't want to be a nerd like her, do you? I'd overhear these phrases as I passed Chloe's room, and I saw how my granddaughter looked me in the eye less and less, how she avoided being alone with me. This year, I turned 67. I didn't expect much, maybe a modest family dinner, perhaps a card from Chloe like in years past. But on the morning of my birthday, no one even remembered. Michael left for work, muttering a quick bye towards the kitchen where I was having my morning tea. Chloe rushed off to school without breakfast. Sarah was in front of the hallway mirror, applying another coat of lipstick. Eleanor, she said, without turning around, we're having guests tonight. Nothing fancy, just a little dinner with friends. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. It would be nice if you made your apple pie. Everyone always praises it. It sounded almost like a compliment, and a flicker of warmth spread through me. Maybe they remembered after all. Maybe this was their way of surprising me. Of course, Sarah, I said. I'll bake a pie. I spent the whole day in the kitchen, preparing not only the pie but other dishes I knew Michael and Chloe loved. By 5, the house was filled with the aromas of vanilla, cinnamon, and stew. I even dressed up a little, in a blue dress Arthur had always loved. For once, I felt needed, important. Sarah returned around 6, laden with supermarket bags. Oh, you've already done all the cooking, she said, glancing around the table. But I bought ready-made meals from the deli. Everyone loves their canapés and salads. My heart sank, but I tried not to show it. That's okay, I said. More food isn't a problem. Sarah pressed her lips together, eyeing my outfit. Are you going to sit at the table like that? What's wrong with it? I asked, looking down at my dress. It's very formal for a home-cooked dinner, don't you think? She shook her head. Anyway, before the guests arrive, could you go down to the basement and see if the heater is working? Doris is always freezing, and we want to show them the wine cellar Michael set up. The wine cellar was Michael's pride, a small room in the basement where he kept a dozen bottles of cheap supermarket wine. But he loved to show it off, talking about bouquets and tannins like a true connoisseur. Okay, I agreed, heading for the basement door. The stairs were steep and poorly lit. I descended carefully, holding the railing. It was cool and damp down there, despite Michael's attempts to make it presentable. I found a space heater in the corner and turned it on, checking how quickly the coil heated up. Suddenly, I heard the door creak open and Sarah's footsteps. Eleanor, she called. Did you find the heater? Yes, it's working, I said, climbing a few steps. But before I could get any higher, the door slammed shut with a loud bang, and I heard the unmistakable click of a lock. Sarah, I cried, rushing to the door. Sarah, the door has slammed. I know, Eleanor, came a voice from the other side. There wasn't a trace of worry in it. It's just the way it was meant to be. What? I couldn't believe my ears. Open the door, please. I'm afraid not, Sarah said, in that patronizing tone she used to explain obvious things to small children. We have important guests coming tonight, and frankly, you'd spoil everything with your presence. Always interrupting, telling your endless stories of the good old days. It's tiresome, Eleanor. I stood there, numb with shock and humiliation. But it's my birthday, I said quietly. There was silence at the door for a moment. Oh, so that's why you're dressed up, Sarah said with a slight chuckle. The party isn't for you, Eleanor. We just wanted to get some friends together, and your birthday is, well, let's just say it's not a very important occasion." Tears welled up, but I swallowed them back. I wouldn't cry in front of her, even if she couldn't see me. "When are you going to let me out?" I asked, trying to keep my voice firm. "When the guests have left," Sarah answered. "Don't worry, you won't starve to death in one night. There's a heater, so you won't get cold. Just sit quietly and don't even try to knock or yell. The music will be loud enough to drown out any noise. By the way, I told everyone you've gone to a friend's house for the weekend, so don't even think anyone will be looking for you." Her footsteps faded away, and I was alone in the semi-dark basement, lit only by a dim bulb and the heater's orange glow. Rage, resentment, and utter helplessness washed over me. How could she? How could my own son allow this? Was I truly so insignificant to them? I sank slowly into an old chair next to the wine cabinet. My hands trembled, whether from anger or fear, I didn't know. At that moment, I felt a vibration in my dress pocket, my cell phone. I'd completely forgotten about it. The small, old smartphone Michael had given me when he bought himself a newer model. "You don't need more than that, Mom. Just for emergency calls." It wasn't just a phone. It was a connection to the outside world, a way to find out what was going on upstairs in my own home while I was locked away like an unwanted item hidden from sight. Holding the phone, a strange calmness settled over me. That small piece of control allowed me to gather my thoughts. A little over a month ago, I'd installed security cameras in the house. Small, almost invisible devices, easily hidden on a bookshelf or behind a picture. And I hadn't done it out of paranoia, but because of a series of unsettling disappearances. My pearl earrings, Arthur's 30th wedding anniversary gift, vanished. I distinctly remembered leaving them in my jewelry box. When I asked, Sarah rolled her eyes and said, "Eleanor, you probably just forgot where you put them. That's normal at your age." Then my mother's brooch disappeared. Then a bottle of expensive perfume I'd saved for special occasions. Then a tiny porcelain ballerina from my bedside table. Each time, Sarah and Michael offered the same explanation. "You forgot. You moved it. It was your fault." But the final straw was my diary. I'd kept it since I was 17, a thick, leather-bound notebook filled with my thoughts, fears, joys, pasted with dried flowers and tickets from cherished memories. It was a part of me. One morning, it was gone. I tore my room apart, then as much of the house as I was allowed. Nowhere. When I turned to Michael in desperation, he shrugged. "Mom, it's just an old notebook. Maybe you accidentally threw it away while cleaning." But I would never throw away my journal. Never. That's when I decided to act. My old friend Carol, from the gardening club, helped me buy miniature security cameras. Her son owned an electronics store. "Do you have a smartphone, Ellie?" she'd asked. "Then you can look at the footage anytime." Carol helped me install the app and set up the cameras to activate on motion and send notifications. We installed 3, one in my room aimed at my closet and dresser, one in the living room with a view of the mantelpiece, and one in the kitchen, just in case. I hadn't told my family. Something told me if they found out, the cameras would accidentally break or disappear, just like my things. And now, sitting in the locked basement, I silently thanked fate for my foresight. I opened the app and the screen split into 3 feeds. The living room was already full of people, about 15 guests, mostly Sarah's salon friends and a few of Michael's coworkers. My untouched pie sat forlornly in the corner of the table, next to Sarah's exquisite canapes. I turned up the sound for the living room camera. The music was loud, but I could still make out snippets of conversation when someone was close to the camera. "Where is your mother-in-law?" asked a woman with bright red hair I hadn't seen before. Sarah rolled her eyes theatrically. "She's at a friend's house, thank God. Honestly, it's a real treat to have an evening without her endless stories about my dear Arthur." The redhead laughed, and they walked away, but my cheeks were burning with humiliation. I shifted my gaze to the kitchen, where Michael was opening a bottle of wine. Doris, our neighbor, a woman my age with whom I sometimes exchanged pleasantries over the fence, approached him. "Michael, where's Eleanor?" I brought her a small gift. My son froze for a moment, then turned with a strange smile. Oh, she's visiting a friend in Riverside. You know, Mom's been so outgoing lately. He grinned, as if it were a hilarious joke. Oh, Doris looked disappointed. It's strange she left on her birthday. Birthday? Michael interrupted, his face a little pale. Oh, right. Yes, we'd celebrated in advance last weekend. A small family dinner, just the way she likes it. Lies. Pure lies. Michael and Sarah had gone to the coast last weekend, leaving me alone with Chloe, who spent most of her time at a friend's house anyway. Doris nodded, but I could see in her eyes she didn't quite believe it. Give her this when she gets back, she said, holding out a small package. It's just lavender tea. Eleanor mentioned once she loved it. My eyes filled with tears. A stranger remembered my preferences and my birthday better than my own family. I swiped my finger across the screen, switching between cameras. Chloe sat in a corner, tucked away on her phone, a look of obvious boredom on her face. She'd never liked Sarah's parties. Too many adults, too many fake smiles, too much strained conversation. Suddenly, my attention was caught by a new guest who had just walked through the door. A tall, lean man with dark, slicked-back hair and sharp features. He was wearing an expensive suit that looked slightly out of place. I recognized him immediately, Brandon Miller, my financial advisor. The man who, on Michael's recommendation, had helped me manage the money from the sale of my house. After Arthur's death, I was so distraught that I gratefully accepted Michael's offer to find a trusted professional. Brandon came to me once a quarter with reports full of numbers and graphs that meant little to me, but he always assured me my investments were in good shape, and that was good enough. Now, seeing him at this party, I felt a knot of unease. What was he doing here? As far as I knew, Michael wasn't particularly close with him. Sarah greeted Brandon with an enthusiasm that seemed excessive, pecking him on the cheek and taking him under her arm to introduce him. But what truly caught my attention was the way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching. Gazes too intimate for mere acquaintances. I switched the camera to the kitchen, where they found themselves a few minutes later, standing too close together by the refrigerator. You're late, Sarah said, but there was no reproach in her voice, only playfulness. The meeting ran late, Brandon replied, looking over his shoulder. Where is she? Don't worry, Sarah grinned. The old woman's locked in the basement. Thinks it's because of the party. She has no idea that her precious son has agreed to send her to Pine Hills as early as next month. Pine Hills? The name sounded vaguely familiar. It took me a few seconds to remember. It was a nursing home on the outskirts of Pomona. Not a bad place, but certainly not elite. I was going to be sent there without my consent? Is everything ready? Brandon asked. Paperwork? Power of attorney. Michael will take care of it next week, Sarah said. The lawyer's already done the paperwork. The old woman won't even know what she's signing. We'll say it's a renewal of insurance or something. And if she says no? Brandon pressed. Sarah shrugged. Then plan B. You've seen how absent-minded she is. Sometimes forgets to turn off the stove, or locks herself in the bathroom. She winked. A couple more of those incidents, and even the most picky judge would find her incompetent. A chill ran down my spine. I never forgot to turn off the stove. I never locked myself in the bathroom. Were these incidents faked? Had they really gone that far in their desire to get rid of me? Are you sure Michael is fully on board? Brandon asked, lowering his voice. He's a weakling, Sarah said dismissively. Of course he has his doubts. She is his mother, after all. But he wants the house unencumbered by an old woman. And most of all, he wants the money. Didn't you say there's still money left in the accounts? What she didn't put into the house? Brandon nodded. About $150,000, plus Arthur's monthly pension and insurance. Not a fortune, but enough to pay for Pine Hills for several years and still have enough left over for home improvements, maybe a new car. A new car? My money, saved my entire life, money Arthur earned, would go towards a new car for Sarah, while I rotted away in Pine Hills. Anger boiled up inside me. Not just resentment or disappointment, but pure, undiluted rage. How dare they? How dare my own son participate in this? Their conversation was interrupted when Chloe entered the kitchen, looking for something in the refrigerator. Sarah and Brandon instantly pulled away from each other, adopting casual poses. "Chloe, darling, what are you doing?" Sarah asked with a strange smile. "Looking for a soda," the girl mumbled, not looking at them. "There are drinks in the living room," Sarah said. Her tone brook no objection. "There's only wine and that nasty mineral water," Chloe countered. "I want a Coke." "Chloe, we don't allow." Brandon interrupted with sudden, surprising gentleness. "Isn't that what parties are for? For everyone to get what they want." He winked at the girl, and I noticed Chloe flinched slightly before grabbing a can of Coke and hurrying out. That brief interaction sent a new wave of unease through me. There was something unsettling, almost predatory, about the way Brandon looked at my granddaughter. I switched back to the living room, where Michael was now talking to a coworker, a full-figured man in a plaid shirt whose name I couldn't recall. "And what about your mother?" the coworker asked. "Does she still live with you?" Michael sighed, sipping from his glass. "For now, yes. But we're thinking about a nursing home. She'd be better off there. Professional care, socialization with her peers." "Is she okay with that?" "Not really," Michael grimaced. "But frankly, she doesn't have much choice. Her money is mostly invested in this house, and it's not in her name. Legally, it's our property. Sarah's already found a nice place with a garden and everything." "It doesn't sound cheap," his colleague observed. "Yes, but Mom has a pension and some savings. And as Sarah said, she's done enough for us. It's our turn to decide what's best for her." I couldn't believe my ears. My turn? After everything I'd given, after selling the house where I'd lived most of my life, where every corner reminded me of Arthur, after giving them almost all the money from the sale, leaving myself only a small amount for a rainy day. Outrage overwhelmed me, but a cold fear gripped me too. If they decided to declare me incompetent, as Sarah implied, I would have no legal rights. They would manage my money, decide where I lived, what I ate when I slept. I switched the camera back to the kitchen, where Sarah was now talking to a friend from the salon, a tall blonde with an excessive amount of jewelry. "So, if everything goes according to plan, we'll have the house all to ourselves by the end of the summer," Sarah said. "We can finally turn that awful room next to the kitchen into the spa area I've always wanted." "Would Eleanor really be okay with a nursing home?" the blonde asked, twirling a strand of hair. "Who cares?" Sarah snorted. "At her age, she should be used to the idea of the young making decisions." "Do you know what she did last week?" "Washed Chloe's silk blouse in the washing machine. $600 down the drain." The blonde gasped dramatically. "I told you she wasn't herself," Sarah continued. "Last week, Michael found her in the kitchen at 3 in the morning. She was supposedly looking for water, but I'm pretty sure she was trying to set the house on fire." "That was an outright lie." "I did go to the kitchen that night because I woke up thirsty, but Michael hadn't even left his room. I would have heard his footsteps." "That sounds dangerous," the blonde said. Their conversation was interrupted when Brandon walked into the kitchen. The blonde immediately found an excuse to leave. "Your husband is becoming a problem," Brandon said without preamble. "I just talked to him about Pine Hills, and he's starting to have doubts. Something about his mother deserving a better place." Sarah rolled her eyes. "He's always like that." He agrees, then he hesitates. "Don't worry, I'll get him in line." "There's not much time," Brandon reminded her. "The longer she's here, the greater the risk of her getting suspicious, especially with the transfers." "Transfers?" I was wary, though of course, they couldn't hear me. "She won't suspect anything," Sarah said. "The old woman barely knows how to use a telephone. She doesn't even know how to check her balance online." That wasn't entirely true. I did know how to use online banking, but I preferred traditional methods. But now, locked in the basement, I was grateful Sarah underestimated my technical skills. "What about the power of attorney?" Brandon asked. "Has she signed it?" "Not yet," Sarah answered. "But Michael promised to get it done next week. He said he'd ask her to update her medical power of attorney because of recent changes in her insurance. She always signs anything he slips her." I clenched my teeth. Yes, I had trusted my son. Trusted him to handle my finances, sign documents he brought me, rarely reading the fine print. But now I knew I couldn't trust him or anyone else in this house. "What if she refuses?" Brandon asked again. Then it's back to the plan with her absent-mindedness and dangerous behavior. Sarah lowered her voice. No one's going to believe an old woman who regularly forgets to turn off the gas or tries to leave the house in her nightgown. It could take time. We have time. The money isn't going anywhere just yet. Sarah smiled and put her hand on Brandon's shoulder. You've taken care of it, haven't you? Still under your control. Brandon nodded, but something like worry flashed in his eyes. Of course I am. I just don't like waiting around when everything could have been ours by now. Ours? Not yours, but ours? What did that mean? Did Brandon have a claim on my money too? And what did he mean under his control? Shouldn't my savings be in my personal accounts? I switched to the camera in the living room, where Michael was now talking to Brandon. My son looked slightly inebriated, his usually neatly coiffed hair disheveled. Look, Brandon, I think we should find a better place than Pine Hills, he slurred, waving his glass. My mom deserves better. She always took care of me. Gave us almost all the money from the sale of the house. Brandon put his hand on Michael's shoulder in a soothing gesture. Of course, my friend, of course. But you realize that the best places cost more, a lot more. And your mother's financial situation, as we discussed, does not allow for such expenses. But the $150,000 that's left. Michael started. It'll run out quickly, Brandon interrupted. Especially if you choose a place with a higher level of service. 2 or 3 years, and then what? You'd have to pay extra out of your own pocket, and you've got a family, a daughter who's about to go to college. Michael frowned, obviously struggling with conflicting feelings. I just want her to be happy. She'll be happy, Brandon assured him. Pine Hills is a great place. There's a garden, weekly activities, nurses around the clock. It's the best thing you can do for her under the circumstances. My son nodded, his resistance clearly melting away. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to make him see that he was being used, that this smooth financial advisor and his own wife were manipulating him to get to my money. But all I could do was watch helplessly through my phone screen, trapped in the basement of my own house. I switched back to the kitchen, where Sarah and Brandon were alone again. He's hesitant, Brandon said. But I think I've convinced him. Reminded him about the college money for Chloe. Good for you, Sarah smiled, moving closer. I always knew I could count on you. What else can you count on? Brandon asked with a meaningful smile, and I turned away from the screen, not wanting to see what was coming next. My heart pounded with fear and rage. They planned to take everything from me, my money, my freedom, my family. And to use my own son to do it, manipulating his guilt and financial ambition. But now I knew. And knowledge is power, as Arthur liked to say. I wasn't going to give up without a fight. I wasn't going to let them send me to Pine Hills and forget about me while they enjoyed my money. I resolutely opened the banking app on my phone. Time to find out exactly what Brandon meant by transfers and my money being under his control. Opening the app, I stared at the screen, trying to remember the password. For the past few months, Michael had insisted he handle all financial matters. You don't have to worry about that, Mom. I'm in control. And like a foolish, naive old woman, I trusted him. I tried several combinations before I remembered the correct password, Arthur's birthday, and the last 3 digits of our old home phone number. When the app finally opened, I gasped. The balance in my main account was only $2,384. What had happened to the $150,000 Brandon and Sarah were talking about? I scrolled through the transaction history. Regular receipts of Arthur's pension and my own small teacher's pension. Regular deductions for utilities, insurance, medications. But then I found a series of transfers to an account labeled Miller Investment Fund. Each transfer was between $3,000 and $5,000, occurring about once a month. I never authorized these. I never signed paperwork for a Miller Investment Fund. This must be what Brandon meant. With trembling fingers, I opened my email. It too was a mess. Dozens of unread emails, mostly ads or spam. But among them, I found monthly reports from the Miller Investment Fund. I opened the latest one. It was peppered with financial terms and charts that told me little, but at the end, something caught my eye, a copy of my signed authorization to transfer funds. Only, it wasn't my signature. Someone had forged it, and rather ineptly. The letters were angular and stiff, whereas my signature had always been rounded and smooth, a legacy of years of teaching calligraphy to elementary students. Furiously scouring my email further, I found several more such reports, each with a forged signature. Then I came across correspondence between Brandon and my son. The emails were labeled forwarded. Apparently, Michael had used my address to communicate with Brandon about my finances. In one email, Brandon wrote, "Michael, per our conversation, I have transferred another $4,000 from your mother's retirement fund to the investment fund. As usual, 10% will remain in your personal account as a management fee. The rest will be invested in our regular assets. The attached form will need to be signed and returned to me for documentation, $400. My son was getting $400 every month for letting Brandon plunder my savings. I felt nauseous. I put the phone away, taking deep breaths, trying to deal with the wave of sickness and dizziness. When I calmed down, I went back to the emails. The financial shenanigans were just the tip of the iceberg. In my junk mail folder, I found a series of emails labeled as spam, but sent from an address that made my heart clench, dianacos.com. The email address of my daughter, Diana. I hadn't seen or spoken to Diana in almost 7 years. Our last meeting ended in a terrible fight, after which she left, slamming the door, vowing never to cross my threshold again. The reason was her marriage to Ben, a man I considered completely unsuitable for my educated, driven daughter. He was a musician, perpetually broke, with questionable connections and an even more questionable past. At least, that's how Michael, who had met him several times, had described him to me. He's using her, Mom. Diana pays all the bills while he finds himself on tours with his rap band. She deserves better. And I believed it. During our last meeting, I told Diana everything I thought about her choices. I told her she was repeating the mistakes of her Aunt Marianne, who'd gotten involved with the same kind of slacker and ended up raising 3 children alone, barely making ends meet. Diana responded by accusing me of never letting her make her own decisions, always controlling her life, and never taking a real interest in what was important to her. "You don't even bother to get to know Ben," she yelled. "You judge him on the words of Michael, who was always jealous of me and did everything he could to turn you against me." I dismissed her words as mere dramatization. Michael had always been the more judicious of my children, the more practical. If he said Ben was a problem, then he was. After Diana left, I tried to contact her several times, but she wouldn't answer. After a couple of months, I sent an email apologizing, but got no response. Gradually, I came to terms with the idea that I had lost my daughter forever. But now, looking at the long list of emails in my spam folder, I realized Diana had been trying to contact me all this time. I opened the earliest letter, dated almost 6.5 years ago, just a few months after our fight. "Dear Mother, I thought for a long time before writing to you. Pride told me to keep quiet, but my heart won't let me. I miss you. Despite all our differences, you are my mother and I love you. I know you're worried about my future with Ben. I know that Michael has told you some not-so-flattering things about him, but Mother, you should know that your son has never taken the trouble to really get to know my husband. Ben is not the man Michael describes. He's a musician, yes, but he's not some penniless drifter. He teaches music at the Riverside School of the Arts, has a permanent contract, health insurance, and his rap band is actually quite successful in its genre. They play festivals regularly and have released 2 albums. I'm not asking you to love him right away. Just give him a chance. Come over for dinner. Get to know him yourself, without the preconceptions that Michael has put in your head. As for money, I'm not supporting Ben as my brother claimed. We both work and contribute equally to the family budget. In fact, Ben earned more than me last year thanks to royalties from his music used in a commercial. Please, Mom, let's try to make this right. Life is too short for such long grudges. Love, Diana." Tears streamed down my cheeks as I finished the letter. All this time, I had believed my daughter had cut all ties with me while she was extending an olive branch that I just couldn't see. I opened the next letter, dated a month later. "Mom, I don't know if you received my previous letter. I've called several times, but Sarah always says you're busy or on vacation. Maybe you're still mad at me, and that's your right, but I want you to know that when you're ready to talk, I'll be here. Ben says hi. He never held it against you for what happened. Says he understands your concern. Love, Diana. Sarah. Of course. She was intercepting Diana's calls, saying I was busy or resting. She must have been setting up filters in my email so that emails from my daughter would automatically go to spam. And she was doing all this while I was grieving the loss of contact with my own child. I continued to read the emails, each one a stab to the heart. Diana wrote about her life, her work, about Ben. She wrote about how much she missed me, how she wanted me to be a part of her life. In one letter, dated about 4 years ago, she mentioned that she and Ben were expecting a baby, my grandson or granddaughter that I didn't even know existed. The ultrasound showed it was going to be a boy. We decided to name him Arthur after Daddy. I so wish you were here for me at this moment, Mom. Ben says it's not too late to make things right. Please call me. I have a grandson named Arthur that I've never met. A child named after my late husband, growing up without knowing his grandmother. The thought took my breath away. The last letter was dated just 3 months earlier. Dear Mom, today little Arthur turned 3 years old. He is growing up to be such a smart and inquisitive boy. He has your eyes, Mama, just as blue and piercing, and your smile. I show him pictures and tell him about you. He knows he has a Grandma Eleanor who lives in Pomona. Sometimes he asks when we are going to visit you. I don't know what to say. I realize you probably don't read these letters. Maybe you changed your email address a long time ago, or you just delete them without opening them. But I keep writing because I can't bear the thought that it's over between us. Ever since my dad died, I often think about how quickly time passes. We can't get back the lost years, Mom, but we can decide not to lose any more. I work as an inspector for county social services, specializing in elderly cases. Every day I see how important family ties are, especially for older adults. And every day I think about you, how you're doing, whether you're healthy, whether you're happy. Michael rarely answers my questions about you. He says you're fine, but you don't want to talk to me. Maybe that's true. Maybe the resentment is too deep. But if you ever change your mind, know this. My door is always open to you. Love, Diana. P.S. I am enclosing our new home address and phone number. We moved to a bigger house last year. I wrote down the phone number with a trembling hand. My daughter, my Diana, had been trying to reach me all these years, and I thought she didn't want to see me. We lost so much time because of lies, because of Sarah and Michael's manipulations. And Diana works for social services, specializing in elderly cases. The bitter irony. My own daughter protects the elderly every day from the likes of Sarah and Brandon, while her own mother has fallen victim to the exact same scheme. I went back to the banking app to understand the full extent of the financial shenanigans. In addition to regular transfers to the Miller Investment Fund, I found other suspicious transactions. For example, monthly payments of $800 to a company called LDC Consulting. The acronym probably stood for Lucy Drake Consulting, a shell company set up to withdraw money from my accounts. Looking further, I found checks written for various amounts and cashed by Michael. According to the transaction comments, the money was for medication, special food, and medical care for Eleanor, medication I never took, meals I'd never seen, care I never received. The more I examined my financial records, the clearer the picture became. In the last 3 years since Arthur's death, over $120,000 had been drained from my accounts. The money was flowing out slowly but steadily, like water through small cracks in a dam. And if it hadn't been for a fluke, the fact that Sarah had locked me in the basement with the phone on my birthday, I might never have learned the truth. Suddenly, the whole puzzle clicked into place. The disappearing things, the intercepted emails, the financial fraud, the plans to send me to a nursing home. It was all part of one big plan to get rid of me and embezzle my money. But one aspect still puzzled me. Why would Michael be involved in this? Yes, he was getting his share of the transfers, but the amounts were relatively small. Would my son really betray me for a few $100s a month? The answer came when I opened one of the letters from Brandon to Michael, tucked away in my drafts folder. Michael, I wanted to clarify the details of our plan after your mother's transfer to Pine Hills. As we discussed, once her guardianship is finalized, we will be able to sell the house. I estimate that with the current real estate market in Pomona, you can get about $800,000. After paying off the remainder of the mortgage, approximately $250,000, and setting aside funds for your mother's stay in a nursing home for the next 5 years, approximately $150,000, you will be left with about $400,000 net profit. According to our agreement, 20% of that amount, $80,000, will go to me as a commission for organizing the entire process and managing the investment. The remaining $320,000 will be at your complete disposal. Of course, all of this must appear as a concern for your mother's welfare. We'll draw up the paperwork to make it look perfectly legal. Awaiting your confirmation, Brandon. That was it. It wasn't the petty thefts from the accounts that were the main goal. They were only a prelude. The real target was the house. My house, bought with the money from the sale of the house where Arthur and I had lived most of our lives. A house that was now worth almost double what it had been 3 years ago, thanks to the rising real estate market. $320,000. That was the price my son sold his mother for. That's what my freedom, my dignity, the rest of my life was worth. I put the phone away and closed my eyes, feeling waves of anger, pain, and betrayal roll over me. How could he? How could my own son, the child I carried, the one I read bedtime stories to, the one whose broken knees I kissed, do this to me? But anger was quickly replaced by determination. I won't let them win. I won't let them turn me into a helpless victim. I have proof of their machinations. I have the phone. And I have a daughter who works for social services, specializing in cases just like mine. I picked up the phone again and found Diana's number, the one she'd left in her last letter. My fingers trembled as I dialed. What would I tell her after so many years of silence? Would she believe me? Wouldn't she think I was just a senile old woman making up conspiracies? But I had no choice. I had to take the risk. Taking a deep breath, I pressed the call button and put the phone to my ear. 1 beep, 2, 3. Maybe she changed her number. Maybe she was at work. On the 4th beep, just as I was ready for voicemail, there was a click, and then a voice I hadn't heard in 7 long years. Hello, Diana said wearily, not recognizing the number. Diana. My voice trembled. It's Mom. There was a silence on the other end, so deep I thought the connection had been cut. Then I heard a ragged sigh. Mom? Her voice was a mixture of disbelief, hope, and fear. Is it really you? Yes, dear, I said, unable to hold back my tears. It's me, and I need your help. Mom? Diana's voice shook. Is it really you? Yes, sweetheart, I said, struggling to hold back tears. It's me. There was a short pause, and then Diana spoke quickly, as if afraid the connection would break. Mom, I've been writing to you for years. I called you. I thought you didn't want to talk to me. I know, darling, I interrupted her. I just found your letters. All your letters. They were forwarded to the spam folder. I never saw them until today. What? But how? She was silent for a moment. Sarah, that's her, right? A bitter laugh escaped my chest. Yes, Sarah. And not just the letters. It's much worse than you can imagine. And I told her everything. About slowly becoming a prisoner in my own house, about the missing things, the cameras I'd installed, being locked in the basement on my birthday, the overheard conversations between Sarah and Brandon, the financial fraud, the plans to send me to a nursing home and sell the house. Diana listened in silence, only occasionally exhaling in indignation or asking short, sharp questions. When I finished, there was a pause. Mom, she finally said, her voice firm and professional. What you are describing is a classic case of financial abuse of an elderly person. And then there's the psychological abuse and unlawful restraint. It's a crime, and we can hold them accountable. Do you believe me? I asked, still afraid she'd think I was paranoid. Of course I believe you, Diana answered without hesitation. In my job, I see cases like this almost every week. Unfortunately, it's often the close relatives who become abusers. And what you're describing is too detailed and consistent for fiction. Besides, her voice softened. I always knew you wouldn't have stopped communicating with me of your own free will. Deep inside, I felt something was wrong. Tears came to my eyes again, but now they were tears of immense relief. My daughter believed me. My daughter was on my side. What are we going to do? I asked, wiping my tears. First of all, we have to document everything, Diana said firmly. You said you have access to the cameras. Keep recording everything that happens, especially if Sarah and Brandon discuss their plans again. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. Okay, what else? Can you forward me those letters from Brandon and the bank statements? I want to have copies of all the evidence in case they find out you know something and try to delete the information from your phone. I'm not sure I know how to do that, I admitted. That's okay, Diana said. I'll explain step by step. For the next 10 minutes, she patiently guided me through forwarding emails and screenshots of bank statements to her address. When we were done, she continued, now I need to call the police. What they've done is unlawful imprisonment, and it's a serious offense. But before I do that, tell me, are you safe now? They can't come into the basement suddenly. I looked back at the heavy wooden door. It was locked from the outside. Sarah said she'd let me out when the guests dispersed, but the party was in full swing. It was unlikely anyone would come down anytime soon. All right, Diana sighed. Listen carefully, Mom. I'm going to call the Pomona police right now. I'll explain the situation and have them come to your house. Then I'm going to contact a lawyer who specializes in elder protection cases. We work with him at Social Security, and he'll be able to quickly file a temporary restraining order prohibiting Michael, Sarah, and Brandon from handling your finances. But the police, I began, suddenly afraid. What if Michael and Sarah convince them that I'm just a senile old woman, out of my mind? That it was all a figment of my imagination. You have proof, Mom, Diana reminded me. Cameras, recordings of conversations, forged signatures, illegal transfers. Besides, her voice hardened. I'm a social services inspector. They'll listen to me. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. And then what? After the police arrive, you'll come with me, Diana said without hesitation. We have a guest room ready for you. In fact, it's always been ready, just in case you decided to visit us. Her voice softened, and I felt a pang of guilt for all the years we'd lost to lies and manipulation. Diana, I started, but she interrupted me. Not now, Mom. We'll have plenty of time to talk later. Right now, the important thing is to get you out of there and keep you safe. She paused. One more thing. There's a man who really wants to meet you. Arthur, I whispered. My grandson. Yes. A smile appeared in Diana's voice. Little Arthur. He knows all about you. I've shown him pictures, told him stories. He asks about you almost every day. New tears came to my eyes. A grandson I'd never seen. A grandson named after my late husband. A grandson who knew about me, thanks to a daughter who hadn't given up hope of reconnecting us despite years of silence. I can't wait to meet him, I said, barely coping with my emotions. And neither can he, Diana replied. Now, let's get back to the plan. I call the police, then the lawyer, then I drive to your place. It's about an hour from Riverside to Pomona. While I'm on my way, keep collecting evidence through the cameras. And if anything changes, if Sarah or anyone else comes down to the basement, call me immediately. Okay, I agreed. But Diana, be careful. I don't know how they'll react when the police show up at the door. Don't worry about us, Mom. Worry about yourself. Keep holding the phone and collecting evidence. I'll call you as soon as I'm done with the police and the lawyer. We said goodbye, and I felt strangely calm. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't alone. I had a daughter who believed me and was willing to fight for me. I had a plan. I went back to the camera app to continue monitoring what was going on. The party was in full swing. Music blared. Guests laughed and talked. Sarah walked between them with a glass of wine, glowing in her red dress as if she were the star of the evening. Michael stood in the corner, talking to Brandon, his face tense. I turned up the sound for the living room camera, trying to make out their conversation through the noise. I'm not sure Pine Hills is the best option, Michael said. I checked the reviews online, and there are a lot of complaints about the staff and conditions. Brandon put his hand on my son's shoulder. Michael, my friend, you're overthinking this. Pine Hills is the perfect balance of price and quality. Yes, there are better places, but they cost twice or 3 times as much. And considering how much we've already invested of your mother's money, we have to be practical. Michael frowned. I know, but still, it's my mother. She deserves better. Of course she does, Brandon agreed, with false sincerity. And she'll get the best on a budget. Besides, once the house is sold, you can move her to a more expensive facility if you want. What about that paper she has to sign? Michael asked, lowering his voice. Are you sure it's legal? Brandon grinned. Technically, yes. It's a standard form of power of attorney, just with expanded powers. It gives you the authority to make all financial and medical decisions on your mother's behalf. Completely legal, provided she signs it voluntarily and in her right mind. And if she refuses, then we'll have to go the longer route, through the courts with medical reports that she's incapacitated. But that could take months. It's much easier if she just signs. They stepped back. Their voices drowned out in the noise. I switched to the camera in the kitchen, where Sarah was talking to the blonde woman I'd seen earlier. So, if everything goes according to plan, we'll have the house all to ourselves by the end of the summer, Sarah said, filling glasses with wine. I've already picked a designer for the renovation. I want to completely remodel the first floor, tear down the wall between the kitchen and dining room. Make an open space. What about the mother-in-law's room? The blonde asked. Oh, it will be my personal spa area. Sarah grinned. Jacuzzi, sauna, massage table. I've always dreamed of such a thing. Is Michael sure he's okay with putting his mother in a nursing home? The blonde looked a little worried. He always seemed like such a caring son. Sarah snorted. Michael's a wimp. Sure, he has his bouts of filial love, but in the end, he always does what I say, especially when it comes to money. She lowered her voice. Plus, I reminded him that if we sell the house, we can finally buy that boat he's been dreaming about for the last 5 years. Men are so predictable. The blonde laughed, but there was an awkwardness in it. Still, locking your mother-in-law in the basement, wasn't that a bit much? Sarah shrugged. Oh, come on. She was perfectly safe there. Besides, it was the only way to have a proper party without her endless stories and wailing. You remember the last time she spent 2 hours telling everyone how she met her dead husband? I almost died of boredom. They left, and I stayed, seething with anger. My story of meeting Arthur was one of my dearest memories. The way we met at an amusement park dance in 1976. The way he'd invited me on the carousel. The way we talked until dawn, sitting on a bench by the lake. To Sarah, it was just a boring old woman story. To me, it was a treasure I kept in my heart. My phone vibrated. Diana. Mom, I've contacted the police, she said without preamble. They are sending a patrol to your house. Should be there in about 20 minutes. I also talked to the lawyer, George Thompson. He's filing an emergency restraining order prohibiting anyone but you from accessing your finances. It's a temporary measure, but it'll give us time to sort everything else out. Thank you, darling, I said, feeling a rush of gratitude. You organized everything so quickly. It's my job, Mom. I could hear the slight smile in her voice. I'm already in the car. I'm on my way to you. Stay in touch and keep recording everything that happens. When the police arrive, they'll call me and I'll explain the situation to them in more detail. We said goodbye again, and I went back to watching the cameras. Some guests had already started to leave. The party was winding down. I saw Brandon walk up to Sarah and whisper something in her ear. She frowned, then nodded, and together they headed toward the stairs to the second floor. I didn't have cameras there. I could only guess what they were talking about in private, probably discussing the details of their plan or something more personal. The thought that Sarah might have been cheating on my son with his trusted professional made my disgust for her even worse. Michael remained in the living room, seeing off the last of the guests. His movements were a little clumsy, a clear sign he'd drunk more than usual. Doris, our neighbor, lingered at the door. It's a lovely party, Michael, she said. But I'm still upset that I didn't get to wish your mother a happy birthday in person. My son looked embarrassed. Yes, I'm sorry about that. I'll give her your present when she gets back. Please, Doris nodded. And tell her I'm always glad when she stops by for a cup of tea. She seems so withdrawn. I'm worried about her. There's nothing wrong with her. Michael answered too quickly. It's just age, getting more withdrawn, less social. Doris looked at him questioningly, but didn't insist. After she left, Michael sighed heavily and fell back on the sofa, his head thrown back. He looked tired and guilty. Maybe, somewhere deep inside, my son still remembered what it meant to love his mother. Maybe not all was lost. That hope quickly faded when I saw him pull out his phone and start browsing something with a smile. Yacht club websites, probably, or the boat catalogs Sarah had mentioned. I switched to the camera in the hallway and saw Chloe coming down the stairs. She was in her pajamas, her long brown hair gathered into a careless bun. She walked cautiously past the living room where her father sat and headed for the kitchen. I followed her through the kitchen camera. Chloe took a bottle of water out of the refrigerator and was about to leave when her gaze fell on the basement door. She froze, looking at the key in the lock. My heart jumped. Had she guessed? Or had she overheard Sarah talking about me? Chloe took a few steps toward the door, then looked over her shoulder as if checking if anyone was watching. Then, to my amazement, she turned the key and opened the door slightly. "Grandma," she called in a whisper. "Are you in there?" I almost dropped my phone in surprise. How did she know? I quickly tucked the phone into the pocket of my dress and rose to my feet. "Yes, Chloe," I answered, trying to keep my voice low. "I'm here." The door opened wider, and my granddaughter's face appeared in the dim light. Her eyes widened with shock. "Grandma," she exclaimed, coming down the stairs. "You're really here." I heard Mom tell Brandon she locked you up, but I thought she was just kidding. Alas, she wasn't, I said bitterly. Chloe came closer, her face contorted with worry and shame. "It's terrible. I can't believe she did this." She lowered her head. "And I can't believe Dad let her." "Your father, he's in a difficult situation," I said, not wanting to completely vilify Michael in my granddaughter's eyes, though he certainly deserved it. "No, grandmother." Chloe shook her head. "Don't make excuses for him. I heard them discussing sending you to a nursing home." I heard Daddy agree, even though he didn't look happy, but he agreed anyway. I sighed. My granddaughter was smarter than I thought. "You're right, dear. And that's not the only thing they did." I paused, deciding how much to tell a 15-year-old girl. "They've also been taking money out of my accounts without my permission." Chloe didn't look surprised. I guess something was wrong. For the past few months, Mom has been getting expensive new things. And when I asked where the money was coming from, she said it was a lucky investment. Suddenly, Sarah's voice came from upstairs. "Chloe, where are you?" My granddaughter flinched and looked at me fearfully. "She mustn't know I'm here," she whispered. "She'll be furious." I nodded, understanding her fear. Chloe knew better than I what Sarah was capable of when she was angry. "Go," I said. "Pretend you just went to the kitchen for water." Chloe hesitated, clearly torn between her fear of her mother and her reluctance to leave me. "But what about you? I can't just walk away and leave you here." "It's okay," I assured her. "I have a phone and I've already called Diana. She's contacted the police. They'll be here soon." "Diana." Chloe's eyes widened even more. "But Mom and Dad said you haven't spoken to each other in years." "It's a long story," I said. "I'll tell it later. Right now, you'd better go before Sarah comes down to check." "Chloe." Sarah called again, her voice closer and more irritated. My granddaughter took a step toward the stairs, then turned back to me. "I can't just leave you here," she said firmly. "It's not right. The police will be here soon," I reminded her. "I need you to be safe when they get here." "Please, Chloe, go." She was still hesitating, torn between her fear of her mother and her desire to help me. I could see the struggle on her young face, weighing her options, trying to make a decision that shouldn't have fallen on the shoulders of a 15-year-old girl. "Chloe, where are you?" Sarah's voice came closer and closer, her irritation clearly audible. My granddaughter stood on the stairs, torn. Finally, she made a decision. "I'll come back for you," Chloe whispered. "I promise." As soon as she went upstairs, she ran up the stairs, closing the door behind her, but not locking it. I heard her meet Sarah in the kitchen. "Where have you been?" Sarah asked suspiciously. "Just getting water," Chloe replied. And in her voice, I heard for the first time echoes of the lies she must have learned from her mother. "I was thirsty." "What took you so long?" Sarah wouldn't let up. "I was looking for my bottle, the blue one," Chloe answered quickly. "I couldn't find it." There was a pause. Then Sarah said, "Go to bed. It's getting late." "What about Grandma?" Chloe asked, and I held my breath, afraid she'd give herself away. "What about Grandma?" Sarah's voice turned icy. "She's at a friend's house, isn't she? When will she be back?" Clever girl, I thought, pretending to believe their lies. "Tomorrow," Sarah answered curtly. "Now go to bed." I heard footsteps retreating and breathed a sigh of relief. Chloe was safe for now. I went back to the phone and checked the cameras. The living room was almost empty, with only Brandon sitting in an armchair with a glass of whiskey and Michael half-slumped on the couch. Sarah appeared from the kitchen, a look of annoyance on her face. "Everyone's finally gone," she said, sitting down next to Michael. "This party was exhausting." "You threw it yourself," Michael said, his voice a mixture of tiredness and condemnation. "To maintain my social status, dear," Sarah replied, rolling her eyes. "By the way, we have to remember to let the old woman out of the basement." Brandon snorted. "Why don't we leave her down there for the night, as a lesson?" Sarah grinned. "Tempting, but no. We don't want her to have any real reason to complain." She stretched. "I'll go in half an hour. Let her sit a while longer. Think about her behavior." I felt the blood rush to my face with anger. Think about her behavior? Like I was a naughty child, not a 67-year-old woman illegally locked in a basement on her own birthday. My phone vibrated. A message from Diana. "Police are on their way. I'm 10 minutes away. Hang in there, Mom." I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. Soon, this would all be over. Soon, justice would be served. Suddenly, the basement door opened again, and I saw Chloe coming down the stairs, in her pajamas and with her jacket in her hands. "Grandma," she whispered. "They're all in the living room drinking. Now would be a good time." I hesitated. Diana's plan was for me to stay in the basement until the police arrived. But wouldn't it be better to face the charges in person? To see their faces when they realized their plans had been exposed? "Diana said the police would be here soon," I said. "Maybe we should wait." "What if they don't believe us?" Chloe objected. "What if Mom and Dad convince them that you just forgot, that you went down to the basement by yourself, or that you—" She faltered. "Aren't yourself." There was truth in what she said. Sarah was a master manipulator. She could convince anyone of anything. Even with proof on my phone, the police could decide it was a family matter that didn't require their intervention. "You're right," I said firmly. It was time to put an end to this. Chloe helped me up the stairs, supporting me under her arm. My heart pounded with a mixture of fear and determination. I didn't know how they would react, but I knew I wouldn't stay silent any longer. We walked out into the kitchen and stopped for a moment, listening to the voices from the living room. They were still discussing the party. Sarah, bragging about how impressed her new outfit had made Michael's boss's wife. "Ready?" Chloe whispered. I nodded, squared my shoulders, and walked out of the kitchen into the living room, head held high. Chloe followed me, her face a mixture of fear and determination. For a moment, there was complete silence in the room. Sarah froze, her glass halfway to her lips, eyes wide with shock. Michael straightened abruptly on the couch, his face pale. Brandon flinched faintly, but quickly regained his composure. "Mom," Michael was the first to break the silence, his voice shaking. "What are you?" "I thought you were in the basement." "I was," I answered calmly. "Your wife locked me in there more than 3 hours ago." "On my birthday, Michael." Sarah came to her senses quickly. "Eleanor, don't be absurd. Nobody locked you in. You must have locked yourself in and then forgotten about it." She turned to Chloe, her eyes narrowed. "What are you doing?" "I told you to go to bed." "I couldn't leave my grandmother in the cellar," Chloe replied, and there was a hardness in her voice that wasn't her own. "What you did was awful, Mother." "Chloe!" Sarah exclaimed, her face contorted with anger. "Go to your room at once." No, said Chloe, crossing her arms. I'm staying with grandmother. Sarah stood up, her eyes flashing. You don't know what you're talking about. Your grandmother is out of her mind. She's confusing reality with fiction. We're just... No more lies, Sarah, I interrupted, pulling my phone out of my pocket. The game is over. What do you mean? She asked, but there was a note of panic in her voice. I know everything, I said. About your plans to send me to Pine Hills. About you and Brandon stealing money from my accounts. About how you've been intercepting Diana's letters all these years. About everything. Sarah's face turned pale, but she pulled herself together quickly. It's nonsense. Michael, your mother is completely out of her mind. We should seriously consider professional help for her. Michael looked from me to his wife, obviously not knowing what to say. Sarah, maybe we should. Shut up, Michael. Sarah said sharply. You can see she's not herself. Oh, I'm more than sane, I said, turning on the camera app. And I have proof. I turned the screen towards them, and they saw the kitchen camera footage of Sarah and Brandon discussing the best way to get rid of me and take my money. What the hell was that? Sarah exclaimed, her voice rising an octave. Were you spying on us? Put cameras in our house. My house? I corrected. The house I bought with my money. And yes, I installed cameras after my stuff started going missing. Arthur's pearl earrings, my mother's brooch, my journal. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Brandon finally spoke up, his tone deceptively calm. Eleanor, you've got it all wrong. We did discuss the possibility of transferring you to a specialized facility, but purely out of concern for your health. And as far as finances are concerned, all transactions were completely legal and with your consent. My consent. I laughed bitterly. You mean those forged signatures? I flipped through my phone and showed them a screenshot of a document with an obviously forged signature. That's not my signature, Brandon, and we both know it. For the first time, I saw his confidence shake. These documents were signed by Michael on your behalf, with your verbal consent. It's standard practice. Liar, I said calmly. I never gave such consent. And Michael knows it. I turned to my son, whose face was now whiter than chalk. Tell me, son, did you really think I wouldn't find out? That I would let you send me to Pine Hills, sell my house, and embezzle my money? Michael lowered his head, unable to meet my gaze. Yeah, I thought it was best for everyone. You need supervision, and Sarah and I can't. Don't lie now, I interrupted him. You weren't thinking about looking after me. You were thinking about money. About the $320,000 you were planning to get when you sold the house. About the boat you wanted to buy with the money. Chloe's eyes widened with shock. Dad, is it true? Michael didn't answer. His shoulders slumped under the weight of shame and exposure. Sarah, however, was not going to give up without a fight. It's all lies, she said, though her voice sounded less confident. You can't prove anything you say. And these so-called recordings can be faked. Who would believe a senile old woman against the word of 3 respectable adults? I will, came a voice from the front door. We all turned and saw Diana standing in the doorway. Next to her was a uniformed police officer, Officer Davies, and a man in a crisp suit whom I assumed was a lawyer. George Thompson, Diana? Michael was clearly shocked by his sister's appearance. What are you doing here? Saving our mother from the 3 of you, she answered coldly. Then she turned to me with a warm smile. Mom, are you okay? I nodded, feeling tears come to my eyes from relief at seeing my daughter. I am now. Sarah quickly changed tactics, a fake smile appearing on her face. Diana, what a pleasant surprise. We didn't expect to see you after all these years. I'm sure you didn't, Diana replied dryly. Especially since you've been intercepting my letters and calls all these years. She turned to the policeman. Officer Davies, this is my mother, Eleanor Hayes, the one I told you about. She was illegally locked in the basement by these 3. In addition, there was financial fraud, which we have documentary evidence of. The officer nodded and stepped forward. Mrs. Hayes, do you want to press charges against these individuals? Yes, I answered firmly. I do. Sarah's face contorted with rage. This is ridiculous. You can't just barge into our house and... It's not your house, the man in the suit, George Thompson, interrupted her. According to the deeds I've examined, this house was purchased with Mrs. Eleanor Hayes's money. Although it's technically in her son's name, however, given the circumstances and the evidence of fraud we will present in court, ownership may be challenged. He pulled documents from his briefcase. This is a temporary restraining order prohibiting anyone other than Mrs. Eleanor Hayes from accessing her financial accounts. Also, here is an order to preserve all electronic and paper documents related to her finances. Any attempt to destroy or alter these documents will be considered obstruction of justice. Brandon, who had remained relatively calm, suddenly turned even paler. You can't do that. This investment was made with the full consent of. Consent obtained by fraud. George Thompson interrupted him. Mr. Miller, forging signatures is a serious violation of the law, and I'm sure the Securities and Exchange Commission will be very interested in looking into your activities. Brandon's face took on a greenish tint. Officer Davies took another step forward. Mr. Miller, I need to ask you some questions in connection with the allegations of financial fraud and abuse of an elderly person. You have the right to remain silent. While the officer read Brandon his rights, I watched Sarah and Michael. My daughter-in-law looked as if her world was crumbling before her eyes, which in fact, it was. Her carefully constructed plan to get rid of me and steal my money was falling apart. Michael looked devastated. He sat with his head down, unable to look at me, at Diana, or at his daughter who stared at him with disappointment and pain in her eyes. How could you, Papa? Chloe asked quietly. How could you do that to Grandma? Michael raised his head, his eyes full of tears. I didn't know. I didn't realize it would go this far. Sarah said that Mom would be happier in an institution, that she needed professional care. Don't put this on me. Sarah interrupted him sharply. You knew exactly what was going on. You signed the documents. You took the money. You agreed to sell the house. Because you gave me no choice. Michael exclaimed, raising his voice at his wife for the first time. You said that if we didn't do it, we'd lose the house, that we wouldn't be able to pay for Chloe's college. That's enough. Sarah interrupted him. Don't you dare put the blame on me. You were more than happy to spend your mother's money on a new car, and you were planning to buy a boat. They continued to bicker, spewing years of mutual resentment and manipulation, but I wasn't listening anymore. I looked at Diana, who walked over to me and took my hand. Let's go, Mom, she said softly. You don't need to listen to this anymore. I'm taking you home. Home? I asked, suddenly realizing I didn't know where my home was anymore. To me, Diana clarified. To Ben and me and little Arthur. He's so looking forward to seeing you. At the mention of a grandson I'd never met, my heart ached. Does he really know about me? Of course, Diana smiled. I told him about you every day. I've shown him pictures of you. He calls you Grandma Ele and asks when you're coming. I felt tears roll down my cheeks, not from bitterness or resentment, but from hope. I still have a family. A real family that loves me. Chloe came toward us, her face worried. What about me? She asked quietly. Can I visit my grandmother too? Diana smiled at her niece and put an arm around her shoulders. Of course, sweetheart. You are always welcome in our home, and your cousin will be happy to meet you. Chloe smiled weakly, but her eyes were still full of worry. What will happen to Mommy and Daddy now? Diana sighed. It depends on many factors. On the court's decision, on how much they will cooperate with the investigation. But one thing I can say for sure is that you won't be alone. We're going to help you through this. As we talked, Officer Davies led Brandon away, who looked absolutely devastated. Sarah and Michael continued to argue, blaming each other, their voices getting louder and angrier. Let's get out of here, Diana suggested, taking me under her arm. Officer Davies said they would contact us tomorrow for an official statement. Right now, you need your rest. I nodded, feeling suddenly tired. This day, which had started so bitterly, was ending with a glimmer of hope. I cast one last glance at Michael and our eyes met for a moment. In his gaze, I saw shame, remorse, and the dawning realization that he had lost something much more precious than money, the trust and love of his mother. Come on, Mom, Diana repeated, pulling me gently toward the door. I let my daughter lead me out of a home that had never truly been mine, toward a new life with a family that truly loved me. 2 months later, I was sitting on the veranda of Diana's house, watching little Arthur play in the garden. He looked just like his grandfather, the same blue eyes, the same smile that made my heart squeeze every time. Next to me was Ben, Diana's husband, a kind, thoughtful man, not at all like the slacker Michael had described. He was indeed a musician, but also a respected teacher at the art school with a steady job and a talent I was beginning to truly appreciate. Diana came out onto the veranda, carrying a tray with cups of tea. "How are you feeling, Mom?" she asked, sitting down beside me. "Better," I answered honestly. "Better every day." And it was true. The weeks after the move were difficult. Nightmares, anxiety attacks, the constant feeling of being in someone else's house. But Diana, Ben, and little Arthur surrounded me with so much care and love that gradually, I began to feel at home. The legal processes moved forward. Brandon was arrested for financial fraud, and the investigation revealed I wasn't his only victim. Sarah was charged with accessory to fraud and elder abuse. Michael faced less serious charges, given his cooperation with the investigation and guilty plea. Attorney George Thompson has been working to recover my money and has already succeeded in recovering a significant portion of it. As for the house in Pomona, the trial was still ongoing, but the prospects were good, given that I had made the principal payment and Michael had admitted it in his testimony. Chloe was now living with us, at least temporarily. After Sarah's arrest and the divorce proceedings Michael had initiated, it had been decided she would be better off at Diana's. She was adjusting to a new life, a new school, new relatives. Sometimes at night, I would hear her crying, and then I would sit with her, holding her hand, reminding her that she was not to blame for her parents' actions. Diana worked to restore my financial independence. With her help, I opened new accounts that only I had access to. She also helped me make a new will and execute a power of attorney for her, a real power of attorney, with my real signature. "There's another letter from Michael," Diana said, interrupting my thoughts. "Do you want to read it?" I hesitated. Michael had written to me every week since I'd left. Long, remorseful letters in which he explained how he had allowed himself to be manipulated by Sarah. How the fear of losing his home and his inability to secure Chloe's future had clouded his judgment. He asked for forgiveness, but didn't insist on it, realizing that some things couldn't be forgiven so easily. "Yes," I said at last. "I'll read it." Diana handed me the envelope and tactfully stepped back to Arthur, giving me space. I opened the letter and began to read my son's familiar handwriting. "I don't know if I can ever fully forgive him. I don't know if we'll be able to rebuild even a shadow of the relationship we had before greed and manipulation poisoned his soul. But I knew one thing: I would no longer let fear and doubt run my life. I would no longer be a silent victim. At 67, I was beginning a new chapter of my life. With the daughter I had gotten back. With the grandson I was just beginning to know. With the granddaughter I was trying to protect from her parents' mistakes. It wasn't the autumn of life I had envisioned, but perhaps it was exactly what I needed. And as I looked at Arthur playing in the garden, at Diana holding Ben tenderly, at Chloe smiling more and more, I realized that true wealth was not in bank accounts or houses. It is in these moments, in these connections, in this love that no one can steal. This whole experience still feels surreal, like a nightmare I just woke up from. But I'm here now, safe and surrounded by love. If you've ever felt unheard, dismissed, or betrayed by those closest to you, what did you do? How did you find your voice again? Share your thoughts below. I'm reading every comment.